So, the third way in which we might hope that privatisation is going to work is to improve efficiency. Yeah, and primarily that comes down to, we said that privatisation, on the one hand, in theory, it creates competition, although, as we said, this isn't necessarily the case. And there's a profit motive for firms. And what you'd hope is that would lead to an improvement in most of your different types of productivity. So, firstly, firms are going to want to decrease costs if they can. Yeah, so under steel, in the case of steel under Thatcher, labour productivity increased by about 300% between 1979 and 1999. So labour productivity. So what that's doing is it's leading to both an increase in X efficiency and also an increase in allocative efficiency. No, sorry, an increase in productive efficiency. Sorry, because you're trying to reduce unit costs. Secondly, obviously there should be an increase in profit, and hopefully that profit is going to be used in a kind of useful sort of a way. So there's going to be an increase in profit so when it was state-run, it was kind of inefficient and unprofitable. And also any profit that was made would be taken by the government. Whereas now, in principle, that profit can be reinvested, and therefore you can get dynamic efficiency over time. And also, there's some sense in which competition should lead to a decrease in prices, again in theory, and that's going to push prices closer to marginal cost. Therefore, there is the possibility of allocative efficiency. So in theory, again, we can get, we could, under the right circumstances, get an increase in efficiency. But again, the key is, when you privatise it, do you get meaningful competition or not? If you do, then probably there are going to be relatively good outcomes. If you don't, then there's no reason for that business to become efficient. It can just keep prices high and there's no particular need to cut costs. And then finally, before we just kind of judge the whole lot, the fourth argument is to reverse underinvestment. So when things are run by the government, then what you tend to find is that firstly, they're not very profitable anyway, so there's not that much profit. But secondly, any profit that there is simply taken by the government that would rather use it elsewhere, for things that win more votes than kind of building more train lines or investing in kind of capital equipment in businesses. So the argument is that by privatising it, privatisation should lead to an increase in profit, and B, it should lead to profit being used. And again, is this true? Depends on where you look. So in areas where competition has been introduced, you look at something like BA, then obviously you've got kind of over the years loads of new planes, because you've got to compete with other top airlines. If you look at the privatisation of BAA, the airports, I've talked before about Gatwick, but you look at Heathrow now, lots of investment going into Terminal 2, Terminal 5, because again, Heathrow now has to compete with Gatwick and Stansted. So it can be the case, that you get investment. But on the other hand, as we said in other areas, if you look at water, as I was mentioning earlier, it's still the case, that in the UK we manage somehow bizarrely to have water shortages, and that's for two reasons. Firstly, there's been no investment in reservoirs, to store the water, and secondly, there's been very limited investment in leakage reduction. So we lose, I can't remember, it's a quarter to a third of all the water that we collect just leaks out the pipes. So if we take all of that as a whole, is privatisation a good thing? You can see that the answer is, well, look, in principle it can be under the right circumstances. And if you look back at the history of UK privatisation, a lot of the early privatisations were things like BP, BT, British Gas, cars, and a lot of those, by and large, have been pretty successful because those companies have been put into areas where they genuinely face competition and where therefore they have to be efficient. A lot of them become profitable. They pay the government corporation tax, so they deliver a lot of what it is that we're hoping for. Some of the later privatisations are things like electricity is mixed in the sense that there are big six companies that kind of dominate that sector. Water, as we said, there's no real way of introducing competition into that sector. So privatising it means it has to be heavily regulated, and then you've got to look at the quality of the regulator. So with privatisation, it's kind of a lot depends on where you are at this moment in time. So you take the UK, really we've privatised pretty much most things that we can, and recent experiments in further privatisation and contracting out, a lot of them haven't really delivered the outcomes that you would have hoped for. So there's been a lot of criticism of the private running of prisons, of private delivery of school meals for children and so on, because they've been introduced into areas where actually maybe it's not all about kind of cutting costs to the minimum that's the key. And obviously, when you put private sector businesses in charge, they're going to want to try and make as much profit as possible. So the bottom line is, if you're going to privatise it, make sure it's an area where if you've got industries attempting to make profit, then they face competition and you're not too bothered if costs are cut.